Mini-Skeins. They are adorable and pretty and relatively inexpensive. They are like candy for knitters. We can go into a booth and scoop up handfuls of them and walk away delighted with all our little twisted skeins of joy. And then you get them home, and then what do you do with them? And they often come in these boxes around December, towards the end of the year. Sometimes they're exactly what you wanted from Santa, and sometimes they're not. Go grab your knitting and a strong drink. I'm going to tell you a story about 2 Advent boxes that I have purchased over the past couple of years. One, Love with a capital L, and the other one, wasn't the biggest fan when I opened it up and when I tested the pattern, and yeah. But I did end up with a rather spendy and probably an item that is more luxe than it should be for what it is. We'll get to that later. Cheers! See you in the lounge. We're going to talk about mini-skeins today, not just mini-skeins from Advent calendars, but mini-skeins that come in Advent calendars, I think, are particularly an issue. At least they have been for me, at least in one instance, because we don't always know what we're getting until we get it. And just like mystery knit-alongs, which I talked about in last week's video, you want to be a little careful with these things. But what do? You bought yourself one, it arrives in December, or somebody gave it to you as a gift, and now you have these mini-skeins. What are you going to do with them? First of all, I want to tell you about an Advent box of mini-skeins that I bought that was extraordinarily successful, and that was the Winter Skies Advent, which was a collaboration between West Coast Yarn Company, which is a local yarn dyer, like local to me. I could drive there in 10 minutes. How cool is that? And Jamie Lomax. Jamie Lomax, if you haven't heard of her, is the one who's doing those doodle decks for doing what she has coined doodle cowls, socks, all kinds of stuff. Fantastic way to use up minis. I'll get there in a second. In the spring of 2022, I found out about the collaboration between West Coast Yarn Company and Jamie Lomax doing this Winter Skies Advent, and I got very excited about it, so I ordered myself the Advent, which was to come in December. Forgot all about it, and then it came. This particular Advent came with 2 full-size skeins and then a handful of adorable little mini skeins. Here's a pic of one of the adorable little mini skeins. It came with a deck of doodle cards with stranded knitting charts on them that all worked together in the same project. So in other words, you could stack these stitch counts on top of each other without having to do any math. So you could just pick from any of these, pick your colorway, and away you go. You just start knitting, which for me was pretty intimidating because I generally like to know what I'm going to get before I start knitting. And so I was a little, but what if this doesn't turn out? Well, I decided, never mind. I'm just going to go with it and see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I'm ripping it back and doing a do-over. Big deal. Yarn is eminently rippable, right? Frog, 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 frog. We've all done it. It's not the end of the world, and particularly if you're working on a cowl. So here it is. Ta-da! This was my ultra successful Winter Skies doodle cowl. Nobody told me how to put these charts together. I just put them together myself. Everybody that made one made a beautiful one. You really can't go wrong. It's quite amazing. And this cowl is how I fell in love with this infinity cowl design. So you're knitting a tube and then you graft it together to make another tube. It just makes the most fantastic, squishy and delicious cowl to go around your neck. It's not it's not too scrunched up. It's got enough body that it really shows off the pattern. You can do things with it. You can kind of fold it down and set it. If it's really cold, you can do this and close your coat up around it. You could, I guess, let's try it, pull it up around your head as a bit of a hoodie. Is this cute? I don't know. Is it? You tell me. Anyway, I fell in love with this when I finished it. I couldn't believe how much fun it was and how much I loved wearing this cowl. Like the hats I showed you last week, like all those other things I've knit multiple times and are just sitting there doing nothing, scarves and shawls, because they just weren't the right format for me. This is exactly the right thing. I'm going to knit all cowls like this from now until eternity, which is really probably not true, but what the heck. This is stranded knitting. It's not mosaic, so it's a little harder. You do have to work with 2 colors at a time. But what is really nice about this infinity cowl format is that all of the stranding is hidden inside here. So it doesn't matter if you leave strands long. You don't have to do any capturing the strands as you go with this kind of thing. You can just leave them long. Nothing's going to happen to them. You don't have to weave in your ends, at least not very well. Like it just doesn't matter. It's all hidden. So I absolutely loved this. Loved. Hugely successful Advent using largely Mini-Skeins. And again, Jamie, I put a link for Jamie Lomax down below. Go check out Jamie's Rav page, her Ravelry page, or her website. She's doing amazing things with these doodle decks. Christmas, Halloween, Easter, all kinds of different themes. They are just gorgeous and super fun if you're a 2-color stranding fan. Moving along. Here's what you came for. The year before, I bought an Advent kit. I'm not going to tell you from where or whose yarn it was to protect the innocent because there was nothing wrong with this kit. Nothing wrong with the yarn, nothing wrong with the pattern, nothing wrong with the source I've got the kit from. All good. But when I got it, it wasn't really what I was expecting. So it came in a beautifully wrapped box. Hooray. I opened it up to find 24 tiny little boxes. So cute. And a candle. And a pattern. And you can see here, I looked at the pattern and I thought, well, it's not super exciting, but it's not bad. And I opened up all the little boxes and they were very pastel. If you have been watching me for a while, you know that pastel isn't really my thing. So I was disappointed in the colorway, but the pattern looked all right. So I thought, okay, I'll give this pattern a shot. It was kind of modular, like knit in 4 squares and then sewn together to make a blanket. And these were fingering weight minis in this Advent kit. So I thought I'd give the pattern a shot, and I got this far. I got 4 starts of the corners done with the first sets of colors. I think it was like into day 4 or 5 at this point. You were supposed to start on day 1 with day 1 box, and then day 2 you do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think it was that concept that kind of felt compelling, like the one that was so successful, which I did the following year. I liked the concept of doing a little bit of knitting every day and having something at the end that was kind of fun. I got that far, I looked at them, and nope, I couldn't get on board with it. It was pastel and springy and just so not me. So not me. And again, not that there's anything wrong with any of it, with any of the colors, just wasn't me. Some of the colors were solids, and some of the colors were speckles. Not to be one to give up, I went looking for a different project to do with these mini skeins that I would like better. I searched through Ravelry, and then I remembered that I had set aside an interest in the 10-stitch blanket by Frankie Blume. The 10-stitch blanket starts with a garter stitch square, and then you just work 10 stitches at a time, attaching as you go and building around the square. I had liked this concept for a long time because I thought it would be a really good like a knit-along project or something really good to do for teaching a knitting class. So I thought, well, this could work, but I didn't want to do it in fingering weight. I wanted it to go faster. I wanted to knit it in a different gauge. So I decided that I would marl or pair up 2 of the mini skeins together as I knit. So I took a solid and a speckle and held them together, which made it close to worsted weight. And I knit the blanket at a worsted weight gauge. And I planned it out so that I could get a bit of a blend from one color to another. So here it is, right? Starting in the center, so you can see, that nice pastel yellow into pinks, in pinks and purples and pastel-y blues. It just reads Easter to me. Does it read Easter to you? It just does. In the 10-stitch blanket pattern, there are 2 options for attaching this strip of 10 stitches as you go. One of them is a very simple one that would end up with the join just looking kind of like a basic join, like this, as if you sewed it. The other was a join that made a sort of single stitch braid appear in between the sections. That's the one I chose to do. I like the differentiation between the sections. I just thought it gave it a little more oomph. And then I got really clever when I got near the end and was almost out of the mini skeins. I found a crochet stitch called the camel stitch, and I did 3 rows of that around the outside edge. So you see how this is crochet finish along here, and it looks almost exactly like that join between the strips. So I was, pretty stoked with myself. It turned out really nice. It's finished, it's polished, it's cute. And I thought, okay, well, eventually there's going to be a baby in my life that I can give this squishy, nice blanket to. And then, in a moment of realization, I did the math. I went and looked up how much I had spent on this Advent box, and adding a little bit on for time, not even that much, I realized that I had knit a baby blanket worth about $300. I took a bit of a deep breath. My cocktail of creativity and determination had mixed up into something pretty unexpectedly bougie for a baby. Now I have to think about who I'm going to give it to. But the kind of shock and awe of knitting a $300 baby blanket is I want to give you some ideas of how you can use up mini skeins in a fun and creative way. So a big one is holding 2 strands together, because most mini skeins that you get are going to be fingering weight. That just seems to be how it goes. But you may not enjoy knitting in fingering weight, or if you're really trying to de-stash, you want this whole process to go a bit faster, which means you want to knit in a heavier gauge. Of course you do. I did. So how you do it is you're going to hold 2 strands together. Let's say you've got this little gradient mini kit, okay? Pretty colors, would be a nice gradient, just moving from one to the other, but it's still going to be pretty blocky. Let's say we want it to blend better, and rather than knitting in this skinny fingering weight gauge, we'd rather knit at a DK or worsted weight gauge. So what you would do is take the first 2 colors, so we've got the lightest and the next lightest, and you're going to hold them, whoops, as I can't find the end. You're going to hold them together like this. So they become a slightly different yarn. And then eventually as you go along, you're going to drop the first color and you're going to add the next lightest color. And you're going to blend that with this one. And then you're going to drop that second color and you're going to blend the next color with that one. And then you're going to drop this one and you're going to blend these two together until you get to the end. In doing that, you're going to take these solid fingering weights and just level them up a notch into something that's got a little more depth and interest in the fabric and is a much nicer gradient blend. You could take this and do this gradient blend just straight up in an infinity cowl, or even just a straight up and down cowl. Cast on some ribbing, start working your gradient until you're almost out of yarn, and bind off in ribbing, and you've got a lovely up and down cowl. You can decide whether you want to do it in stockinette stitch or garter stitch, and off you go. This sweater I'm wearing is a great example of stash busting through marling. I wanted to knit this Blume pullover by Julie Hoover, but I didn't have the right weight of yarn. So I marled together this Manos del Uruguay Serena, which is a blend of alpaca and Pima cotton, with a lace weight alpaca and bamboo blend. And it is just a delicious fabric that looks way more interesting than if I had just knit it in a solid in either one. And you can see I also just threw in, I didn't have enough to do the whole thing with the sleeves, so I threw in sleeves in a contrast cashmere gray and did some contrast edgings. You can use your creativity to use up those odds and ends of yarn and apply them to a pattern that you really like. And since I've had mini-skeins and stash busting on my mind these days, I recently came across this make a long story short blanket, which is kind of genius. It's garter stitch on the bias. You just go crazy changing colors as you want to. It uses up approximately 4,000 yards of yarn. So great stash busting, mini skein, marling. Remember, when you marl, you're going to use up twice as much yarn in putting two yarns together. I do have plans to do a whole tutorial on marling pretty soon. I hope you enjoyed this tale of two advent calendars. If you did, please boop that thumbs up button for me. I know that you have lots of fantastic ideas and patterns for using up minis and stash busting, and I would absolutely love it, as would everybody else who's going to be hanging around here. Please put them down in the comments and let me know. So I'm going to finish my martini. In the meantime, you keep your needles clicking, and if you're interested in seeing me talk some more about stash busting, you can check out this video down here, which is part 3 of my stash organization series. In the meantime, go play with your minis and have a great week, and I hope to see you real soon. Bye! What year is this? This is 2024. 2023 was last Christmas. 2022. Okay.